Welcome to the Googleplex. Today I'm going to be chatting with Fred Chung, whose job here at Google is really making your life easier. He's one that helps strategize how we speak with developers so that we can build better products and you can build better apps. I've been looking forward to this day for quite a while, actually.
Likewise.
Because it's always good to speak with good developer advocates.
And thanks for the coffee.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's good coffee too, and
coffee.
it's real. So tell us about yourself and what brought you to Google and what you've been doing and how'd you get to what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. A bit of background information about myself.
Sure.
Before Google, I used to be a software engineer in the enterprise integration space.
Okay. So you really wrote code. That's not marketing.
I wrote code
EI
that
code
works. And when I joined Google, I was a sales engineer, working with AdWords API clients, helping them integrate with AdWords using the AdWords API, which is a SOAP-based technology.
We all remember SOAP, right?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. And then I moved to Android as a developer advocate back in the Android 2.0 days.
2.0, wow.
Yeah, do you remember the code name?
Eclair.
That's
I never
right.
forget a dessert.
Absolutely. We've made a lot of progress both on the platform and the app ecosystem front. I remember one of the first presentation assignments was to go to Barcelona, a conference in Barcelona, and talk to the audience about what is Android. Back then, it was a relatively new mobile operating system. We had to tell them that, okay, it's got a camera, it's got a few sensors. We had a lot of fun back then, and since then, things have evolved dramatically.
We've come a long way.
And also, we, based on what we've seen developers have done in the past few years, it's been amazing to see the sophisticated apps that are coming out.
And also with the more sophisticated devices and the things that they can do, consumers are a lot more demanding for new types of apps and new sophisticated requirements that developers have to meet. It's quite a challenge, right?
Yeah, on Android, right, as you know, we have not only phone and tablets, right? We also have Android Wear on your wrist.
Wear.
Android TV and Android Auto in your vehicles. So these things represent a lot of new opportunities for developers, and we're in an exciting time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Developers being able to meet these new sophisticated requirements need a lot of support. And I think that's where your role comes in, right, as a developer platform manager. So as people are going onto the Android platform and going onto the Google platform, they need to learn how to do all these new things, and that's where you fit in, right? So tell us a little bit about what a DPM actually does.
Oh yeah, a DPM stands for Developer Platform Manager. Let's talk a little bit about developer platform. What does it mean?
Right.
If you look at Google, we offer quite a few developer products that allow third-party developers to build innovative solutions on. For example, Google Maps API, which allows mobile application developers, Android, iOS, and web-based developers to easily integrate maps into their solutions.
Cool.
Or Google Play game services that allow game developers to build more engaging games to keep you spend time with them.
And like common functionality like high score tables and that kind of stuff too.
Yeah,
right?
leaderboards and quests and stuff like that. But the point is, we look at the collection of API products and platform and tools as a developer platform.
I see.
And as a developer platform manager, I work very closely with the Android product and engineering teams to help them figure out the developer outreach strategy for their products.
Okay, so it's like you're advocating on behalf of the developer with our engineering team as well as vice versa.
Yes, we actually see developer advocacy as a two-way street.
Okay.
Right? Not only do we want to use relevant opportunities to educate and inspire developers on certain new features, best practices, and third-party integrations, we also want to use the opportunity to listen to developers.
Okay.
Right? In fact, we have multiple channels available, both online and offline. So for online, in the case of Android, we have Plus Android developers on Google+.
And that's a really big community.
Yes, with a lot of traffic and activities on a daily basis.
Right.
And that's very exciting. And in the offline world, we also work with Google developer groups.
Okay.
We partner with them from time to time to run events, and that's a great avenue for us to get feedback from developers.
cool. So if developers out there watching this really want to give us feedback, they can go to those ways. They can go to the Android Plus site. They can go to a Google Developers group. We got news groups, that kind of thing.
That's right. And if you've built interesting solutions, let us know through one of these channels too. We would love to learn about the innovations.
We always hear about this thing called developer experience, and a good developer experience is very important. And what is that to you? What is developer experience, and what do we do at Google to provide a great developer experience?
Right. Developer experience is a very broad area, and in particular, we care about things such as API design. Right. We want to make sure the design that goes into the API makes sense to developers. Right. They have to conform to certain semantics that developers are accustomed to. For example, we recently extended the notification APIs in the support library to support not only phones and tablets, but also Android Auto and Android Wear, these new form factors. We want to make sure the design conforms to certain standards. So that's why we have things like car extender and wearable extenders in the support library.
So we build like a core API, but then are able to extend that consistently as new devices come on board.
And when it comes to educating developers, we want to make sure that we have adequate content both on developer.android.com, which is our official documentation site that educates developers the best practices and APIs associated with features.
And there's some great samples on there as well that folks can download and dissect and learn from that. Right?
Yeah. We want to build educational samples that help developers appreciate certain features, and also we want to highlight best practices.
We spoke a little bit earlier about how new sophisticated requirements are coming online, and what is it that makes development difficult nowadays? What are the challenges that developers may face?
Getting the user experience right is an important thing that developers need to be aware of, and I think that's one of the challenges that developers these days have to face. So, for example, these different screen sizes. You don't necessarily want to say you have an existing phone app. You don't want to shrink it to your watch, and likewise, you don't want to just stretch it on your big screen TV. You really want to rethink the user experience that go on to these new form factors by, if you have access to a designer, work with them. And if you don't have access to a designer, on our documentation site, we have some design-focused content, and we have also introduced some design content on our YouTube channels as well. Cool.
And isn't it also within Android Studio, as you're building, there are templates for the different design form factors?
Yes, let's talk about Android Studio. Android Studio is the de facto IDE for Android developers.
And we all love Android Studio.
Yes, we do. So in Android Studio, we have added templates for new projects. So if you're in the process of creating a new project, you can selectively add additional capabilities. For example, you can add watch support for Android Wear, Google Glass support to your application. So the idea of this is that developers get to focus on their core expertise and let us work on the boilerplate by automating the generation process.
Got it. And if the developer experience is good, the consumer's experience is going to be good, right?
Yes.
So you've been working as a developer platform manager with Google for a while, and you've worked with developers, and you see all these great opportunities that are out there for developers, be it web and cloud and wearables and mobile, and I'm sure it can be quite confusing for developers to be focused onto where to get started on the next great opportunity. And what would your advice be?
I think mobile platforms is definitely one important area that developers should think really hard about. And when you look at mobile applications, a lot of them are actually powered by some sort of cloud backend. So it'd be good to sort of look at these two areas simultaneously.
And then also forgetting that while all this is going on, there's also emerging markets, right? And cloud and mobile is huge in emerging markets. So, I mean, do you have advice for developers thinking about getting into these emerging markets, looking for the next user base? Yeah.
So I think emerging market is in particular a very interesting area because consider how users in the emerging markets are accessing the internet. They're using their phones and tablets, right? Instead of desktops.
Well, and there's also there are in emerging markets they may be accessing via phones, but there's potentially disconnected scenarios, right? That a lot of these emerging companies, they don't have the same level of network infrastructure as maybe Eastern Asia or Western Europe or United States and Canada have. So there's unique challenges for a developer building for that kind of thing.
The implication for developers is that when you architect your applications, you need to think about these scenarios, right? You want to think, you want to make sure that your application maybe support offline capabilities, or make sure your applications to perform efficiently on the network, for your, on the memory and the CPU.
Cool, and I understand you've put together like a lot of material to help developers with that, some dev bites around that. So what were they called again? I can't remember the...
Yeah, so the team has put out a series of dev bites called Android Performance Patterns.
Performance patterns, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Performance matters.
Right, performance matters, right?
Right.
So always keep performance in mind when it comes to creating your applications.
Cool, cool. So anything else that you'd like to talk to developers about, or you'd like to hear from other developers?
Well, if you think about designing for a platform, designing for an API, it is a hard task.
Yes.
It's difficult, right?
Yes.
It's hard to get right, in your first try.
And we want to get it right for
and
developers.
admittedly, we don't get it right all the time, right? And that's why we want to listen to developers, right? We actually see advocacy as a two-way street, right? Not only do we want to educate developers on certain best practices, but we also want to use the opportunities to learn from developers, their pain points, their difficulties, their challenges, their improvement suggestions on the product. And then a big part of what we do is to work with internal teams, product and engineering teams, to provide the feedback that we hear from developers so that we can improve the products.
I've learned so much, Fred, thanks. And it's been great to hear about how Google is a two-way street in advocacy and how we're listening to feedback from developers. And developers, please take advantage of that. Please, all the avenues that Fred has mentioned are in the description below. They'll also be right at the end of this video. We'd love to hear from you. We want to build better APIs and we want to build a better platform that will allow you to build better apps. Thanks for watching this far in this episode of Coffee with a Googler, and thanks most of all for Fred for being here and being our special guest today.
Thanks for having me, Laurence.